the hollow beneath. Simon had always feared the dark, the way it hid things, made them larger. At 36, he thought he'd conquered it, but the house on the cliff proved him wrong. Perched above the stormy coast of Dunmere, it was a weathered cottage, its windows rattling in the wind, its walls stained by salt and time. He'd inherited it from an uncle he barely knew, a recluse who'd lived there alone until his disappearance last winter. The will was vague, the house a burden, but Simon, jobless and adrift, had nowhere else to go. He arrived on a gray afternoon, the sea churning below, the air thick with salt and something sour, like decay. The cottage was small, its rooms cramped, its furniture draped in dust sheets. The realtor had warned him about the cellar. Tricky access, best left alone. But Simon found the door on his first night, hidden behind a bookcase, its lock rusted but open. The air from below was cold, heavy, carrying a low hum, like distant waves trapped in stone. Simon descended, a flashlight in hand, the stairs uneven, the walls slick with moisture. The cellar was vast, far larger than the cottage, its ceiling lost in shadow. The hum was louder, vibrating in his chest, his teeth. At the center was a hole, perfectly round, its edges smooth, dropping into darkness. The air around it pulsed, the hum becoming a whisper, not words but feelings, hunger, longing, loss. Simon's flashlight flickered, and he saw something in the hole, not light, not shadow, but a presence, vast and formless, watching. He ran, the stairs endless, the whispers chasing him. The cellar door slammed shut, the bookcase scraping back into place. He didn't sleep, the hum lingering, the whispers faint but alive, saying his name. By morning, he noticed marks on his hands, thin, gray veins, pulsing faintly, like the hole's edges. They weren't there yesterday. Simon tried to leave, packing a bag, but the front door wouldn't open, the windows wouldn't break. His phone was dead, its screen flickering with static that formed a circle, like the hole. The hum grew louder, the whispers clearer, urging him to the cellar. He barricaded the bookcase, but the walls groaned, the floor trembling, as if the house was breathing. Desperate, Simon searched the cottage, finding a journal in a drawer, its pages brittle, written by his uncle, Thomas. Dated last year, it described the hole as the hollow, a mouth to something older than the sea, something that listened, waited, fed. Thomas wrote of hearing whispers, feeling his body change, seeing his face in the dark. The last entry was a warning. It knows me. It wants me. Don't look too long. Simon's marks spread, his skin graying, his fingers trembling. The hum was in him now, pulsing with his heartbeat, pulling him to the cellar. He saw his reflection in a window, not his face but his uncle's, gaunt and hollow-eyed, his mouth open in a silent scream. He covered the window, but the reflection lingered, whispering his name. The bookcase rattled, the cellar door creaking. Simon knew he couldn't stay, but the house wouldn't let him go. The hum became a voice, calling him to the hollow, promising answers, promising home. Simon's fear was a living thing, clawing at his chest, but the hollow was stronger. The marks on his hands, gray, pulsing veins, had spread to his arms, his neck, glowing faintly in the dark. They moved, curling like waves, sinking with the hum that filled the cottage. The whispers were clearer now, not words but his name, spoken in a voice that wasn't human, echoing from the cellar, the walls, his own throat. He hadn't slept, couldn't eat. The hum was constant, vibrating through the house, making the air heavy, the shadows deep. His reflection was everywhere, in the glass of a clock, the shine of a knife, the surface of a cup, not his face, but his uncle's, or something worse, its eyes black, its mouth open, whispering. He covered every reflective surface, but the whispers followed, urging him to the cellar, to the hollow. Simon clutched Thomas's journal, its pages his only lifeline. His uncle wrote of the hollow as a listener, a force that fed on those who looked too long, binding them to the dark. He mentioned a way to close the mouth, a ritual involving the light of will. But the details were vague, the pages stained with gray, like the marks on Simon's skin. The last entry was a plea. It sees me. It takes me. Stay away. The hum grew louder, the whispers a chorus, chanting his name, promising peace. Simon's marks burned, his skin graying, his fingers stiffening. He felt heavy, his breath shallow, as if the hollow was inside him, pulling him down. The walls groaned, the floor trembling, and he saw shapes in the shadows, human but not, their eyes black, their mouths open, like the hole. Simon tried to fight, barricading the bookcase, but the cellar door rattled, the wood splintering. He searched the cottage, tearing through drawers, finding letters from others. A woman in 1899, a man in 1926, a child in 1974. All spoke of the hollow, the hum, the marks. All ended the same. I am its. Simon's fear turned to desperation. He wouldn't be its. He grabbed a flashlight, its beam weak, and moved the bookcase, opening the cellar door. The air was freezing, the hum deafening, the whispers a command. Look. Join. Be. The hole was there, larger, its edges pulsing, its darkness alive. Simon's flashlight died, and he saw it, a shape, not light, not shadow, but a presence, vast and hungry, its edges fraying like breath. The whispers became a scream, and Simon's marks glowed, his body trembling. He saw his reflection in the hole's surface, not his face but countless faces, his uncles, strangers, their eyes black, their mouths open in song. He stepped back, but the hole pulled, the hum in his chest, his thoughts, his self. He saw his life, his failures, his loneliness, his fears, dissolving into the dark. Simon's will surged, fueled by terror. He screamed, the sound his own, and ran, the stairs endless, the whispers chasing. He reached the cottage, slamming the cellar door, but the hum followed, the marks spreading, his skin graying. The walls were alive, their shadows moving, their eyes watching, their mouths chanting his name. He found a hidden room, behind a false wall, its floor covered in gray dust, its walls etched with circles, like the hole. At its center was a lantern, old and rusted, its glass cracked but glowing faintly. Simon touched it, and the hum faltered, the whispers fading, the marks dimming. The lantern was the light of will, the ritual's key, but it was weak, its glow fading. The cellar door burst open, the hum a roar, the shadows lunging. Simon clutched the lantern, its light flickering, his marks glowing, his body betraying him. The hollow was coming, and he was running out of time. Simon's body was a battleground, the hollow's marks, gray, pulsing veins, claiming his skin, his thoughts, his self. They curled up his chest, his face, glowing with a cold, relentless light, sinking with the hum that shook the cottage. The whispers were a chorus, not just his name but his fears, his regrets, spoken in voices that knew him too well. The lantern was his only hope, its faint glow dimming the marks, silencing the whispers, but it was weak, its light fading with every step. He hadn't left the hidden room, couldn't face the cellar door, now splintered, its shadows spilling into the cottage. The hum was deafening, the air thick with decay and salt, the walls alive with shapes, human but wrong, their eyes black, their mouths open, like the hole. Simon's reflection was in every surface, the lantern's glass, the floor's shine, the window's crack, not his face, but his uncle's, or something worse, its eyes hollow, its mouth whispering his name. He reread Thomas's journal, its pages crumbling, its words a lifeline. His uncle wrote of the hollow as a feeder, a mouth that consumed the self, binding it to the dark. The ritual, the light of will, required the lantern lit with the fire of defiance. But the method was unclear, the pages stained with gray. The last entry was a scream. "It takes me. It is me. Don't look." The hum surged, the whispers commanding, "Look. Join. Be." Simon's marks burned, his skin graying, his fingers locking. He felt the hollows pull, stronger now, urging him to the cellar, to the hole. The shadows moved, their hands reaching, their mouths chanting. Simon clutched the lantern, its glow flickering, his will fraying. He saw his life, his dreams, his failures, his loneliness, slipping into the dark. He had to act. He lit a match, its flame weak, and touched it to the lantern's wick. The glow surged, the hum faltering, the shadows screaming. The marks dimmed, his skin warming, his breath easing. The lantern was the key, but its light was temporary, its fuel unknown. Simon moved, the lantern in hand, its glow cutting through the shadows, the whispers fading. The cellar door was open, the holes hum a roar, the air freezing. Simon descended, the stairs slick, the walls pulsing, the whispers a storm. The hole was larger, its edges fraying, its darkness alive with eyes, mouths, hands. Simon's reflection was in its surface, not his but countless faces, their eyes black, their mouths open in hunger. The lantern's glow held them back, but it flickered, its light weakening. The whispers became a scream, and Simon's marks glowed, his body trembling. He saw his uncle's face, the others, their eyes pleading, their selves consumed. The hollow was vast, not a place but a force, its hunger endless, its mouth eternal. Simon's will burned, fueled by fear, and he raised the lantern, its light blazing, the shadows crumbling, the whole trembling. But the lantern's glow faded, the match spent, the hum surging. The shadows lunged, their hands cold, their mouths open, pulling him to the hole. Simon screamed, the sound his own, and through the lantern, its glass shattering, its light exploding. The hole screamed, the shadows dissolving, the whispers silenced. Simon ran, the stairs collapsing, the cottage shaking, the hum faint but alive. He reached the main room, the cellar door gone, the walls cracked, the shadows watching. The marks remained glowing, pulsing, the hollow's voice in his chest, calling him back. Simon was losing himself. The marks, gray, pulsing veins, covered his body, glowing with a cold, relentless light, pulling him to the hollow. The lantern's glow had saved him, shattering the shadows, silencing the whispers, but it was gone, its glass broken, its light spent. The hum was fainter but alive, vibrating in his chest, his thoughts, his self. The whispers returned, soft but insistent, chanting his name, promising peace, promising home. He stayed in the cottage's main room, the cellar door a ruin, its shadows creeping upward. The walls were alive, their cracks forming eyes, mouths, hands, watching, whispering. His reflection was everywhere, in the shine of a spoon, the crack of a window, the surface of a cup, not his face, but his uncle's, or something worse, its eyes black, its mouth open, calling him. Simon covered every surface, but the whispers followed, the hum growing, the marks burning. He searched Thomas's journal, its pages crumbling, its words fading. His uncle wrote of the hollow as a wound, a mouth that fed on will, binding the self to the dark. The ritual, the fire of defiance, required the lantern lit with the light of self. But the method dot was missing, the pages torn. The last entry was a cry. "It is me. I am it. Run." The hum surged, the whispers commanding, "Return. Join. Be." Simon's marks glowed, his skin graying, his body heavy. He felt the hollows pull, stronger now, urging him to the cellar, to the hole. The shadows moved, their hands reaching, their mouths chanting. Simon's was afraid, his thoughts slipping, his self dissolving. He saw his life, his hopes, his fears, his loneliness, fading into the dark. He had to fight. He found a candle, its wick black, its wax gray, hidden in a drawer. He lit it, its flame weak, but the hum faltered, the shadows retreating, the marks dimming. The candle was the light of self, the ritual's fuel, but it was small, its flame flickering. Simon moved, the candle in hand, its glow cutting through the shadows, the whispers fading. The cellar was open, the holes hum a roar, the air freezing. Simon descended, the stairs crumbling, the walls pulsing, the whispers a storm. The hole was vast, its edges fraying, its darkness alive with eyes, mouths, hands. Simon's reflection was in its surface, not his but countless faces, their eyes black, their mouths open in hunger. The candle's glow held them back, but it flickered, its wax melting, its light weakening. The whispers became a scream, and Simon's marks glowed, his body trembling. He saw his uncle's face, the others, their eyes pleading, their selves consumed. The hollow was endless, its hunger eternal, its mouth a wound that never closed. Simon's will burned, fueled by terror, and he raised the candle, its light blazing, the shadows crumbling, the hole trembling. But the candle's flame died, the wax spent, the hum surging. The shadows lunged, their hands cold, their mouths open, pulling him to the hole. Simon screamed, the sound his own, and through the candle, its wax scattering, its light fading. The hole screamed, the shadows dissolving, the whispers silenced. Simon fell, the stairs gone, the cottage collapsing, the hum faint but alive. He crawled from the ruin, the cottage a pile of wood and stone, the sea roaring below. The marks remained glowing, pulsing, the hollow's voice in his chest, calling him back. Simon thought he'd escaped, but the hollow never let go. He fled Dunmere, settling in a city, far from the cottage, the cliff, the hole. He rented a small apartment, its walls bare, its reflective surfaces covered. He worked odd jobs, avoiding people, avoiding the dark. But the marks, gray, pulsing veins, remained, glowing faintly, a reminder of the hollow within. The hum was faint, buried in his chest, but it was there, waking him at night, whispering his name. He didn't tell anyone. The cottage was gone, the cliff a memory, but the hollow was eternal. He saw it in his dreams, the hole, its edges fraying, its darkness alive with eyes, mouths, hands, his face among them, whispering. His reflection was wrong, even in the matte surfaces of his laptop, his coffee mug, not his face, but his uncle's, or something worse, its eyes black, its mouth open, calling. He stopped looking, but the hollow saw him. The apartment wasn't safe. Cracks appeared in the walls, thin and curling, forming circles, eyes, mouths. He painted over them, but they returned, pulsing with gray, smelling of salt and decay. The hum grew louder, the whispers clearer. You are ours. You are dark. Simon's marks burned, his skin graying, his body heavy. He felt the hollow's pull, even here, thousands of miles away. He tried to fight, searching for answers in libraries, online, in forgotten texts. He found myths, hollows, wounds in the world, feeding on will, binding souls to the dark. A sailor's log, buried in an archive, spoke of a ritual to close the mouth, requiring the light of self, a sacrifice of will. Simon had tried, but his will was breaking, the hollow creeping inward. The apartment shook, the cracks spreading, the shadows screaming. Simon saw them everywhere, in the walls, the ceiling, the floor, his face, whispering, calling, consuming. He ran to the bathroom, the only room without cracks, and locked the door. The sink's faucet gleamed, showing his reflection, not his, but the hollow's, its eyes black, its mouth open, beckoning. He smashed the faucet, water spraying, but the reflection remained clearer, closer. The hum became a chorus, deafening, commanding "Be." Simon's marks glowed, his body trembling, his breath catching. He saw the faces, his uncle, the others, trapped in the dark, their eyes empty, their selves consumed. He saw the hollow, not gone but alive, in him, in the city, in the world. The dark was everywhere, and he was its vessel. Simon's will faltered. He saw his life, his dreams, his fears, his loneliness, dissolving into the dark. The whispers promised peace, but it was a lie. The hollow didn't free, it consumed. Simon screamed, the sound his own, and ran from the bathroom, the apartment a maze of cracks and shadows. The walls pulsed, the faces his, the hum his own. He left the city, driving aimlessly, the marks glowing, the hum relentless. He stopped at a roadside motel, its walls bare, its reflective surfaces covered. But the hollow found him. The cracks returned, the shadows clearer, the whispers thicker. Simon knew he couldn't run. The cottage was in him, the hole was him, and the hollow was eternal. He stood before a window, the glass uncovered, reflecting the night, the hollow, him. His reflection was the hole, its edges fraying, its darkness his. He pressed his hand to the glass, the marks pulsing, the hum complete. The ritual hadn't failed, it had claimed him. He whispered, not words but dark, his body fading, his self dissolving. Months later, a new tenant moved into Simon's apartment. They found a hole in the wall, small and round, its edges smooth, pulsing faintly. They patched it, thinking it a flaw. That night, they heard a hum, faint and low, like waves trapped in stone. They didn't cover it. They didn't know. The hollow was patient, and it knew their name. The silent pair. Lila and Owen weren't exactly friends, but circumstance had attached them to each other like a needle to a string. They were both 17, restless, and haunted by the kind of loneliness that drove them to seek out the oddities. Lila was quick-witted and reserved, her mind a knot of questions she never spoke aloud. Owen was brasher, her smile hiding a restlessness that drove him onward, always after something he couldn't define. They had collided at a school assembly, assigned partners for a history assignment they cared nothing for, and discovered in each other a common hunger for the outskirts of the world, where maps ended and tales began. Owen had suggested they go to the cabin. He had learned of it from his uncle, a ranger who spoke quietly of a location far within the Blackwood Forest, a building that came and went like a mirage. The cabin was ancient, older than the forest, and those who came across it did not often speak of it again. The locals referred to it as the Silent Pair's cabin, but no one could say who the pair were or why they were silent. Lila was skeptical but agreeing. She put on a flashlight, a notebook, and a small knife, just in case. Owen carried a camera, a thermos of coffee, and a map that was guesswork rather than guide. They left early on a Saturday, the air crisp with the smell of pine heavy on their skin. The Blackwood Forest was only an hour from their town, the trees towering and close-set, their branches interwoven to block out most of the sun. The trail was not marked, and Owen's map became useless within a couple of minutes. Lila was able to find her way by instinct, her eyes catching on small signs, a snapped branch, a bit of trampled moss, that indicated whoever had come this way had likely walked along it before. The forest was still, abnormally so, the only sound their footsteps and the occasional drop of water from hidden leaves. After what had felt like hours of walking, the mist started to rise, a heavy, gray shroud that curled around the trees and engulfed the trail. Lila's flashlight beam made barely a dent, and Owen's camera dangled useless around his neck. They were on the verge of turning back when they caught a glimpse of it. The cabin, squat and worn, its wooden walls charred as if burned. It was perched at the center of a clearing that looked too tidy, the ground surrounding it stripped, the mist parting like a curtain to transform it from nothing into something. The windows were dark, the door slightly open, and the air had a distant humming, a machine's drone on the air. Lila's gut twisted, but Owen was already advancing, his smile giving way to a look of intent curiosity. "Come on," he breathed, "we're here. Let's go see what's inside." Lila hesitated with her own hand on the knife concealed in her pocket, but trailed after them. The vibration increased as they walked, and the fog pressed against them, chill and viscous. The door groaned beneath Owen's push, opening into a room illuminated by sourceless gray light. The cabin was unoccupied, but for two chairs placed opposite one another in the middle, their surface polished to a shine. The walls were blank, the air stagnant, and yet the buzz was deafening now, ringing through Lila's body. Owen entered, camera at the ready, but the lens fogged at once, as though the cabin did not want to be photographed. "This is strange," Lila said, her tone almost lost to the buzz. "Let's go." Owen turned a deaf ear to her, walking around the chairs. "These," he said, running his fingers along them. "They're warm. Like someone has just sat there." Lila's gaze jumped to the door, ajar still, the fog swaying in the opening outside. She stepped back, but the buzz changed, turned to a voice, not a sound, not words, but a presence, a low insistent tone addressing her mind directly. "Stay," it urged, and she froze, her breath lodging in her throat. Owen registered it too, his hand resting on the chair back, his face whitening. "You," he started, but the door slammed shut, the sound a clap of thunder. The humming ceased, and the room fell into a silence that weighed on their ears. The flashlight on Lila sputtered and died, and the gray light inside the room faded, leaving only the chairs, their profiles sharp against the darkness. He grabbed her arm, holding her hard. "We have to get out," he said, shaking. But the door did not open, its surface hard and unyielding to touch. Lila hammered on it with her fists aching, but the surface of the wood was palpable, resisting her blows. The windows fared no better, their glass opaque, reflective only with their own distorted faces. The voice came back again, clearer, a duet of tones that intertwined like a melody. "Sit," it said, and chairs creaked, as though welcoming them. Lila's heart pounded, but her body obeyed, moving toward the closest chair. Owen was already seated, his eyes open wide, his fingers clutching the armrests for support. Lila struggled against the impulse, her legs shaking, but the voice was insistent, coaxing her down into the seat so that she sat facing Owen across the intimate space. Their eyes locked, and Lila recognized her own fear reflected back at her. The chairs were hot, unrealistically hot, and the wood throbbed beneath her touch. The voice came again, not with words but with visions, snatches of forest, of figures she did not know, of arms reaching from the fog. The silent pair, she understood, were not human but something other, something that resided within the cabin, within the chairs, within the vibration that was building again, and again, and again. Lila attempted to stand, but her body did not comply. Owen was quivering, mouth open silently, and she observed something within his eyes. Most definitely fear, but recognition as well, as though he comprehends what is approaching. The room became chilled, light diminishing to only their faces, illuminated by a radiance that did not seem to come from any source. The mist filtered through the walls, wrapping about the chairs, and Lila could feel it touching her skin, cold and intentional, similar to fingers along her spine. "We are not alone," Owen half whispered, and the chairs creaked, their wooden legs seeming to move like living things. Lila's knife was useless in her back pocket, her notebook long abandoned. The voice was within them both now, a presence crowding their minds, and Lila did know, with an unshakable certainty that made her blood run cold, that the silent pair wanted them there. Forever. The air inside the cabin became thick, like the mist had turned into a solid that pushed against Lila and Owen's skin. The chairs gripped them like clutches, their heat radiating to a burning intensity that made Lila's palms dampen with perspiration. Owen's face was ashen, his eyes casting about the room for something, anything, to shatter the enchantment of the silent pair. The voice within their thoughts was a persistent presence now, not speaking but observing, its pressure like 1,000 eyes drilling into their very spirits. Lila's heart thudded, her mind flailing for an escape. The door remained closed, the windows dark, and the fog curled around them, taking on human shapes, long, thin bodies with no faces, their forms blurring when she tried to look at them closely. Owen's camera was on the ground, its lens broken, and Lila's flashlight did nothing, its battery dead. The knife at her waist was her only chance, but her arms were weighted, stuck to the chair by some unseen force. "We have to battle it," she stated, her voice shaking but resolute. "Owen, look at me. We are better than that." Owen looked back at her, and for a brief second she could see the kid who had laughed at her incredulity, who had challenged her to venture into the unknown. But the light had flickered out, being overtaken by a blank emptiness that terrified her far worse than the cabin ever had. "They're in my head," he breathed. "They know everything. My dreams, my nightmares. They're taking me." Lila's gut twisted inside her. She could feel it, too, the voice intruding on her memories, tugging at memories she had tried to lock deep within. The evening her mother had walked out, the day she had stood on a bridge alone, contemplating what falling would be like. The silent pair weren't observing only. They were feeding on their suffering, their secrets. She looked at Owen, struggling to keep her voice even. "They are not taking you," she said to him. "You are with me here. Hold on to that." Owen nodded but tensed, his knuckles widening where they curled around the chair. The mist deepened, and the forms within grew braver, advancing, their outlines clearer, tall, gaunt, with fingers that tapered from the end of their wrists. Lila's mark, though she possessed no mark, not yet, loomed like a phantom pain, a signal of what the pair could do. The tone changed into a duet once again, two voices blending into each other. "Choose," it said, and the sound resonated throughout the room, humming within the chair's wood. Lila gasped for breath. "Choose what?" she questioned, but the voice did not respond. A third chair, smaller, with its wood unworked and rough, appeared amid them, standing unoccupied, but Lila sensed its presence as though it were seated, expecting someone, or something, to take its seat. Owen's eyes grew wide with horror. "They want one of us," he croaked, so softly that it was almost a whisper. Lila shook her head, not believing it. "No," she said. "We both go. Together." But the voice did not relent, its pressure driving harder, and the figures in the fog advanced, their fingers touching the arms of the chairs. Lila's knife remained in her pocket, and she concentrated on it, willing her hand to reach for it. The chair protested, its heat scalding her skin, but she pushed on, her fingers wrapping around the handle. She withdrew it, the glint of steel shining in the gloom, and struck at the air, trying to shatter the pair's grasp. The mist curled back, and the forms hissed, a dry leaf rustle of air. Owen gasped, shuddering as though released, and Lila rose, her legs shaking. "Let's get out of here," she said, taking hold of him. Owen struggled to get up, but the cabin resisted. The floor canted, the walls buckling inward, and the third chair groaned, its wood splintering with a life of its own. The voice boomed, no longer a harmony but a dissonance, full of images of the forest, bodies entwined with roots, eyes that refused to close. Lila's knife weighed her hand, but she clutched it hard, dragging Owen toward the door. They reached it, and Lila hammered with her other hand, the wood creaking beneath her blows. "Open!" she screamed, and the laughter boomed, a sound that rattled the cabin. Owen was trembling, eyes unfocused, and Lila spotted something on his palm, a dim mark, a spiral of lines that glowed with a muted light, like embers under ash. "No," she breathed softly, her heart aching. "Owen, look at me. You're not theirs." But Owen's face was transforming, features blurring, as if the mark was erasing him. "I can't," he said in a faraway voice. "They're too powerful." Lila would not release it. She drove the knife into the door, the tip burrowing deep, and the cabin shuddered, the fog swirling furiously. The forms lunged, their fingers brushing against her skin, cold and hard, but Lila wriggled free, taking Owen with her. The door creaked, a beam of light cutting across, and Lila heaved with a grunt, her shoulders groaning. The door creaked open, and they staggered out into the forest, the mist enveloping the cabin that had once protected them behind them. The air was chill, the trees looming large, and the drones ceased, their ragged breathing taking its place. Owen fell, his wrist still bearing the mark, the lines radiating across it. Lila dropped to her knees beside him, her knife tightly gripped, her gaze sweeping across the mist for the figures that she had no doubt were still there. "We are not safe," she gasped, her throat raw. "They are headed for us." Owen nodded, haunted eyes staring at me. "I looked at them," he said. "The silent pair. They are not human. They are dot forever." She assisted him to a standing position, her own fear a palpable weight she couldn't dispel. The forest came alive, its shadows writhing, and the mark on Owen's hand glowed with an intensified light, a signal for the pair. They had fled the cabin, but the silent pair weren't finished with them yet. They had made their choice, and Lila was sure, a knowledge that chilled her blood, that that choice was far from finished. Blackwood forest wrapped around Lila and Owen, its branches reaching out, digging at the fog with claws. The air clung heavy with scents of damp soil and something acrid, like rot. Owen's hand shook within Lila's, spiral mark on his skin glowing softly, lines inching their way up his arm like strands of light. Lila's pulse thudded, the knife still clutched within her other hand, its handle smeared with shreds of cabin door board from where she had torn it loose. The buzz was gone, but the stillness was far worse, an absence that throbbed with the silent pair's presence within it. "We have to keep going," Lila said softly, as though the forest could overhear them. She tugged Owen along, his feet unsteady, his gaze steady on the mark. He said nothing, normally boastful confidence gone, and Lila caught a flicker of remorse for bringing him into this hell. But there was no time for regretting it. The fog was thickening, and she could sense the pair's gaze, unseen but always there, watching them from the shadows. "Where are we going?" Owen asked, his voice hollow. "The cabin's gone. The trail's gone." Lila had no response. The map was useless, and her own instincts, which had led them to the cabin, were confused by fear. She looked out at the forest, hoping for a marker, a break in the row of trees, something to get her bearings. But the fog was a barrier, and the trees were the same, their trunks black and slippery, as though covered with oil. The ground was spongy, pulling on their boots, and each step a compromise of their own with the forest. "The mark," Owen blurted out suddenly, alarm creeping into his voice. "It's moving. It hurts." Lila halted, facing him. The mark had reached the elbow, lines glowing within it, and Owen's face was slick with perspiration, eyes large with something more than fear, resignation, as though the mark was taking something from him as well as from his body. She seized his arm, past the burning of the mark, and shook him. "Engage it," she urged. "You're not theirs. Yet." Owen laughed bitterly. You don't understand, Lila. They are within me. I hear them. They want me to return. Lila's own throat began to constrict with fear as she could see it there, reflected in his eyes, the silent pair drawing him, their voice threading into his mind. She gripped the knife tightly, her thoughts working at a frenetic pace. The mark was the key, she understood. It was how the pair had him, how they trailed him. If she could negate it, shatter its hold, they could get out of there. Hold yourself still, she said, bringing the knife up, Owen's eyes widening, but he did not pull back. She touched the knife to the mark, not cutting, only testing, and Owen hissed, tensing up. The lines burned with a higher light, and the cloud of mist around them coalesced with those tall, gaunt figures, their reaching fingers stretching out. Lila's heart was pounding, but she did not back down, her tone unshaken. I'm not letting go. She ran the knife along the edge of the mark, brushing against the skin, and Owen let out a cry, not of pain but of relief, as though the knife had released something. The figures in the mist hissed, their outlines wavering, and the mark receded slightly, its lines withdrawing. Lila continued on, her steps measured, her gaze fixed on Owen's. The forest seemed to struggle, the ground shuddered, the trees creaked, but Lila did not pause until the mark was weak, a shadow of what it had once shown. Owen leaned back against a tree, gasping for air. It's still there, he said, but it's quieter. They're not so loud anymore. Lila nodded shakily, her own shaking hands. She had no idea what she had done, only that the knife had broken the hold of the pair, at least temporarily. But the forest was closing, the mist deepened, the figures becoming braver. They had to get out before the mark blazed again. They ran quicker, Lila at the forefront, her eyes scanning for the slightest indication of the trail. The forest resisted them, its roots tripping their feet, its branches catching at their clothing. The figures pursued, always at the periphery of her view, their fingers caressing Lila's neck, Owen's arm, cold and persistent. Lila clung to her knife, its weight keeping her grounded, but she understood that it would not be enough. The silent pair were long-lived, they were unyielding, and they would not release their chosen so easily. And then she spotted it, a glimmer of light, not the gray of the cabin but the golden yellow of sunlight shining through the fog. A narrow, overgrown trail led toward it, and Lila's heart soared. There, she said, tugging on Owen. That is our exit. Owen trailed behind, taking slower steps, his gaze flicking to his arm, where the mark glowed with a fiercer light than before. They are angry, he breathed softly. I feel it. They're on their way. Lila did not look back. She could see them now, not the humming but a rustling, like dry leaves sliding over stone, and the forms were near, their arms nearly touching. The trail grew narrow, the trees crowding close, and the light danced, as though the forest was devouring it. Lila's knife at the ready, though her strength failed her, her body weighed down with the intensity of the pair's gaze. They came to the light, a clearing where the fog swirled open to a sky that was too radiant, too unbroken. The trail ran out at a brook, its surface smooth and quiet, its reflection of the trees unbroken by even a ripple. Lila halted, her breathing caught. The brook was not right, too quiet, too smooth, its surface unbroken even by a ripple. Owen's mark blazed and he dropped to his knees, holding on to his arm. They're here, he breathlessly stated, as his voice cracked. Lila turned around, and the figures were present, standing at the edge of the clearing, eyes searing across the fog. The silent pair, not within the cabin but within the forest, within the river, within the air. Lila brought her knife up, her face shrieking. Leave him alone! The figures did not shift, but the stream did ripple, and from beneath it two faces rose, not human, but echoes of Lila and Owen, their eyes hollow, their mouths open on screams that they did not make. The mark on Owen's arm glowed with an intense light, and Lila could feel it, a phantom ache on her own skin, as if the pair were branding her as well. The forest narrowed around them, and the light diminished, with only the stream, the figures, and the silent pair's constant hunger remaining. The surface of the stream was a mirror, reflecting Lila and Owen's faces, but eyes that stared back were not theirs. They were hollow and unblinking, full of a hunger that made Lila's skin crawl. Figures at the edge of the clearing did not move, their deathly forms merging with the mist, their blazing eyes focused on the two of them. Owen dropped to the ground beside the stream, his branded arm shaking, the glowing spiral now spreading across his chest, its lines vibrating with a heartbeat rhythm. Lila's knife was raised, but her hand trembled, the knife useless against the silent pair's presence, which seemed to seep from the water, from the trees, from the air itself. Lila spoke barely a whisper, her throat hoarse. "Owen, stand up. We are not finished." Owen's head was bowed, eyes focused on the reflection of the stream, where his own face was disappearing, turning into something other, something older, hollow, with a smile that belonged not to him. "They're showing me," he said, with a faraway tone, "what I'll become. What we'll become." Lila's heart fell. She clutched at his shoulder, trying to pull him back, but he was heavy, stuck by the mark on the forest floor. The stream swirled and the reflections changed, revealing not only their faces but moments of their lives. Lila's mother disappearing from view, Owen's father yelling, lonely nights, terrors that they had never discussed. The silent pair were creating a tapestry of their suffering, binding them to the forest, to the brook, to the cycle that they had chosen without ever speaking of it. "No," she said, her tone rising. "You don't get to decide who we are." She struck the knife across the surface of the stream, the blade shattering the reflection, and the water frothed, dark and irate. The figures hissed, the forms wavering, and Owen gulped, jerked rigid as though awakening from sleep. The mark on his chest faded, but ever so slightly, and Lila realized that the pair were far from vanquished, merely caught off guard. "Stand up," she urged once more, tugging Owen up from the ground. His gaze was clearer now, but the fear was there, seared deep into it. The clearing was narrowing, the trees encroaching, their branches stretching out like fingers. The fog was a living thing, coiling around their ankles, and the forms were advancing, their feet quiet on purpose, encircling the brook. Lila's mind was a whirlwind. The stream was the link, she had realized, the silent pair's anchor, their window into the world. If they could get across it, shatter its grip, they could possibly get out. But the water was off, its surface unnaturally still, its depths concealing something that raised her skin into goosebumps. She gripped Owen's arm tightly, her knife at the ready, and started for the stream. "Don't," Owen snapped, his tone cutting. "It is not water. They are inside it." Lila paused, staring at the stream. The reflections had come back, sharper now, not their faces but the silent pair themselves. Two figures, neither male nor female, their bodies made from mist and darkness, their eyes blazing with a hunger that was old as the world. The figures at the edge of the clearing moved a step nearer, their arms extended, and Lila sensed the air grow taut, as though the forest was holding breath. "We have to attempt it," she added, her own voice shaking but resolute. "It is our only hope." Owen nodded grimly, and they walked side by side, into the stream. The water was icy, abnormally so, and stuck to their legs like hands, pulling them along. Lila's knife shook in her hand, and Owen's mark burned, radiating light into the water that made the shapes beneath them appear. Long, thin bodies that moved with jerky ease, their fingers reaching up. Lila cried out, stabbing at the water, and the forms recoiled. But the stream struck back, its current swift and desperate, pulling them deeper in. Owen staggered, his branded arm underwater, and the lines burned hotter, spreading across the top of his shoulder. Lila caught him, her own legs falling, the water up to her waist. The forms stood at the edge of the stream now, their eyes without eyelids, their hands dipping into the water, disturbing the forms beneath. "Wait," Lila said, her voice shattering. She swung the knife, not at the creatures but at the stream itself, trying to slice through the pair's grasp. The water split open, and for an instant she glimpsed what lay beneath, smooth, dark stone, inscribed with the same spiral as Owen's mark. The stream was no longer a stream but a gateway, a mirror to the silent pair's control. Owen's eyes were going glassy, his body folding in on itself, and Lila could see they were losing him. She let go of the knife, its point stabbing into the water, and caught him with both arms, holding on with what strength she had. The forms floating beneath reached out for her legs, their touch cold as ice, but Lila did not release him. "You're not theirs," she cried, her own voice a sob. "You're mine." Her words were a spark, and Owen's eyes focused, their hand clutching hers. They forced themselves on, the water fighting, the forms advancing on them. The edge of the stream was near, the woods on the other side dark but tangible, a world that the pair could not call their own. Lila was weakening, her body numb, but she struggled on, pulling Owen with her till they fell onto the bank, the water letting them go with a sulky hiss. They fell, the fog swirling to enfold them, the forms dissolving but their essence remaining. Owen's mark remained, its lines weakening but present, vibrating with the pair's need. Lila's knife was gone, her hand left empty, but she bore a mark of her own, no longer on her body but within her head, a memory of the pair's touch, a guarantee they would return. The forest was still, the brook was quiet, but Lila was aware they weren't free. The silent pair were waiting, and the mark on Owen's chest, the shadow within her mind, were strands of a web they could not yet leave. "We have to keep walking," she said, supporting Owen upright. His eyes haunted her, yet he nodded, and they walked into the forest, the mist at their back, the silent pair standing there, their eyes fixed on them from the shadows. The forest stretched out before Lila and Owen, its trees a maze of shadow and fog. The air was heavy, each breath a battle, and the ground beneath their feet shifted, as though the blackwood forest was alive, reforming itself to trap them within it. Owen's mark glowed weakly, its spiral patterns now twisted across the collarbone, a constant symbol of the silent pair's mark on him. Lila sensed their presence as well, not as a mark but as a weight within her mind, a breath that hung on the cusp of her thoughts, calling for her to turn back, to give up. They walked without purpose, the trail to the stream forgotten, the sun they had seen a distant memory. Lila's pockets were hollow, her knife missing, and Owen's camera a dead weight at his throat, its lens cracked. They were sodden from the stream, their bodies shivering with cold and fatigue, but they could not allow themselves to rest. The figures were ahead of them, their gaunt forms wavering in the fog, their blazing eyes never far away. "We cannot keep running," Owen uttered, his voice raspy, hardly a sound. "They'll catch up with us." "They always do." Lila's jaw clamped shut. "Then we battle," she said. "We discover how to break their grip. The mark, the brook, the cabin, all of it is linked. If we know it, we may be able to prevent them." Owen's laugh was hollow. "You think we can understand them? They're not human, Lila. They're something else. Something that's been here forever." Lila did not dispute it. She could feel it, too, silent pairs age, hunger, patience. But she would not give up, not when Owen's eyes were still Owen's, not when she could still sense her own will combating the pair's dark presence within her mind. She searched the forest for a sign, a clue, something to direct them on their way. The trees were taller, their limbs tangled so tightly they covered the sky, and the fog was a living entity, creeping around their legs, speaking with the pair's voice. And then she caught a glimpse of it, a glimmer, not the yellow of the sun but a chill, silver light, throbbing beneath the trees. It was unlike the gray of the cabin, unlike the reflections from the stream. Lila's heart skipped, although she couldn't explain why. There, she exclaimed, pointing. It's something. Perhaps it is a way out. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. Or them, he said. Another trap. Lila did not reply. She made her way into the light, taking Owen with her, his steps hesitant but sure. The forms behind them trailed, their swishing more distinct, like leaves scuttling across rocks. The light intensified, illuminating a clearing small enough compared to that near the stream, its surface strewn with smooth, dark pebbles. A small tree went up from its center, its trunk gnarled, its branches leafless, and from its roots shot out the silver light, steady like a pulse. Lila halted at the edge of the clearing, her lungs gasping for air. The tree was wrong, its bark overly smooth, its roots overly symmetrical, like spreading veins across rocks. They glowed with light, the same spiral pattern as Owen's mark on her skin. The fog opened, and the silent pair appeared at the edge of the clearing, their eyes blazing, their hands immobile. They were not in the tree but present within it, their weight pressing against Lila's ribcage. "What is it?" Owen whispered, trembling. His mark flared up, its lines burning with a sharper light, and he grasped at his chest, face contorted with pain. Lila's mind was a whirlwind. The tree was at its center, she understood, the silent pair's anchor, older than the cabin, older than the brook. The spirals on its roots, on Owen's mark, were their language, their intent, keeping the forest bound to their hunger. She moved nearer, past the figures, her gaze steady on the tree. A faster pulse of light, a clearer, no longer suggestive, but demanding whisper within her mind, "Choose." Owen dropped to the ground, the mark on his body now across half of his chest, burning with red lines beneath his shirt. "They're calling me," he stammered, his voice shaking. "They want me to stay." Lila crouched beside him, her palms on his shoulders. "No," she said, her tone fierce. "You don't belong to them. We're leaving. We're going together." And the light of the tree was drawing her as well, its spirals repeating the shadow within her mind. The figures moved nearer, their fingertips touching the air, and Lila felt the pair's choice that they made, one to remain, one to leave, the never-ending cycle of their hunger. She rose, her body shaking, and turned to the tree, its roots shining ever so much brighter, its branches stretching like arms. "I choose neither," she said, her voice a scream. "You won't have us." The ground trembled, the rocks splitting, the fog swirling crazily. Owen's mark blazed, and he screamed, but Lila caught him, her arms clamped about him. The figures rushed, their arms icy and hard, but Lila thrust them back, her will afire against their hunger. The light of the tree blinked, its roots weakening, and the spirals began to vanish, their pattern fragmenting. The numbers screamed, a cry like breaking glass, and the fog fell, the forest remaining without sound. The tree was only a tree, its roots dark, its limbs unmoving. Owen's mark faded, its lines receding, and Lila could feel the shadow within her mind recede, the silent pair's voice gone. They staggered out of the clearing, the forest lying ahead, the fog clearing. The trail came into view, weak but tangible, and led them to a road where a string of headlights burned far ahead. Lila and Owen ran, their muscles burning, their chests heaving, till they came to the edge of the blackwood forest, the world outside it light and full of life. They were free, yet the mark on Owen's skin, though slight, remained, and the shadow within Lila's mind hung back, a breath too quiet to be detected. The silent pair were long-suffering, and the forest would always wait, its hunger unsatisfied, its choice never really made.